The man thought the dog had gone crazy. He had been walking through the storm for hours, his legs barely holding him up anymore. The cold had already crept deep into his body, and every step felt heavier than the last. Finally, he collapsed into the snow. Just for a minute, just long enough to close his eyes. But the police dog wouldn't let him. Every time the man tried to lie still, the dog barked loudly. When he tried to curl up in the snow, the dog grabbed his jacket and pulled him back up. The man shouted at the animal, tried to push it away, but the dog refused to leave him alone. And the stranger thing was, the dog looked terrified. Not angry, terrified, as if it knew something the man didn't. Something about what would happen if he stayed in the Stay with us, because this story will leave you speechless. Before we start, make sure you've hit like and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. And I'm genuinely curious. Where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now let's go back to the beginning. Marcus Hale was not the kind of man who asked for help. He was 43 years old, a former long-distance runner, someone who had completed 2 marathons and 1 brutal trail race through the Appalachian Mountains. He had hiked alone dozens of times. He knew forests. He trusted his legs. He trusted his instincts. That Saturday morning in late November, he had parked his truck at the trailhead just outside Pinecrest, a small mountain town in northern Colorado, and shouldered a modest day pack. The goal was simple: a 6-mile loop through the Ridgeline Trail, a few hours of silence, and back before dark. The forecast had said chance of light snow. Meteorologists in mountain regions will tell you that chance of light snow is perhaps the most dangerous phrase in the English language. Marcus noticed the sky changing around noon. The white-gray clouds that had been sitting lazily on the horizon began moving, fast. Faster than he expected. They rolled over the ridgeline like something alive, swallowing the blue sky in great gray mouthfuls. The temperature dropped 7 degrees in under an hour. He turned back immediately. That, at least, was the right decision. But the snow came before he could make it to the fork in the trail that would take him back down to the parking lot. It came sideways, wind-driven, with the kind of furious intensity that erases landmarks in minutes. The rock formation he'd used as a waypoint on the way up, gone. The carved wooden trail marker, buried. The footprints he'd left in the thin layer of earlier snow, gone, like they'd never existed. Marcus stood at what he believed was a fork in the trail and made his choice. He was wrong. He walked for 40 minutes in the wrong direction before he understood what had happened. By then, he was deeper into the forest, descending into a narrow valley he had never seen before, and the light, what little filtered through the storm clouds, was already beginning to fade. He pulled out his phone. No signal. He tried his GPS app, the one he'd downloaded specifically for hiking. It loaded a blank screen and then crashed. Marcus Hale, a man who had never asked for help in 43 years of life, stood alone in a snowstorm in the Colorado wilderness and understood, very calmly and very clearly, that he was in serious trouble. The human body is extraordinarily resilient. It is also, in the right circumstances, extraordinarily fragile. Marcus knew enough about wilderness survival to know he needed to keep moving. Movement generates heat. Heat is life. He pushed forward through the snow, trying to climb back toward the ridgeline, using the slope of the ground beneath his feet to guide him. But the snow was now knee-deep in places, and the wind hit him in gusts that felt like walls. Every step required effort that, an hour earlier, would have cost him nothing. Now each step cost something he couldn't afford to keep spending. His fingers went numb first. He had gloves, thin running gloves, the kind meant for cool autumn mornings, not blizzards. He buried his hands under his arms and kept walking. Then his feet. His trail runners were waterproof but not insulated, and the cold had found its way in through the laces, through the tongue of the shoe, through the thin wool of his socks. He tried to count his steps to stay focused. Got to 100. Started again. 2 hours after the storm began in earnest, Marcus's legs stopped cooperating. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't like a cramp or a pulled muscle. It was subtler than that. A heaviness, a reluctance, as if his legs were no longer fully receiving the messages his brain was sending. He stumbled, caught himself on a pine tree, stood there for a moment, breathing hard, watching his own breath turn to vapor in the frozen air. Just rest for a second, he thought. Just 1 second. He slid down against the base of the pine tree, his back against the bark, his legs stretched out in front of him in the snow. The cold beneath him was immediate, but it was also, and this was the thing that frightened him later when he understood what had happened, it was also comfortable. The snow seemed to mold around him like a mattress. The wind was slightly blocked by the tree. His body, which had been fighting for 2 hours, suddenly stopped fighting. His eyes closed. He didn't mean for them to. They simply closed. And Marcus Hale, who had never asked for help in his life, began to fall into the kind of sleep you do not wake up from. Sergeant Dana Kowalski had been coordinating mountain search and rescue operations out of Pinecrest for 11 years. She had seen every kind of emergency the Colorado wilderness could produce. Lost hikers, injured climbers, overconfident tourists who wore sneakers on glacier trails. When the storm rolled in that Saturday afternoon, her radio crackled to life at 3:47 p.m. "We've got an abandoned vehicle at the Ridgeline trailhead," said the deputy on the line. "Truck's been there since morning. No return." Dana was already pulling on her gear before he finished the sentence. She assembled a team of 4. Herself, 2 deputies, and a volunteer with backcountry experience. And then there was Rex. Rex was a 7-year-old Belgian Malinois, AK-9 unit who had served with the Pinecrest Sheriff's Department for 5 years. He was lean and intense, the color of dark caramel, with ears that never seemed to stop moving, always tracking sounds, always processing. His handler, Officer Pete Vasquez, said Rex had a way of knowing things before anyone told him. Not in a mystical sense. Just, his nose was extraordinary, and he seemed to understand urgency in a way that went beyond training. They entered the trailhead at 4:15 p.m., with roughly 45 minutes of usable light remaining. The snow was heavy. Visibility was perhaps 20 meters ahead. Rex picked up a scent almost immediately. He moved with purpose, nose working the trail, tail low and focused. Vasquez let him work, keeping the leash loose, trusting the dog's instincts over the storm. They had gone perhaps a mile up the main trail when Rex stopped. He lifted his head, looked left, off the trail, into the trees, into the valley below. "He's got something," Vasquez said quietly. Rex pulled left hard, off the marked trail, into unbroken snow, into the darkening forest. Dana Kowalski looked at the trail going forward and the dog pulling sideways, and she made the call that would save a man's life. "Follow him," she said. Rex moved fast through the snow, pulling hard on the leash, nose down, then up, then down again. He navigated around a deadfall of pine trees and descended a short slope into the valley without hesitating. He knew exactly where he was going. They found Marcus Hale 5 minutes later. He was slumped against the base of a large pine tree, eyes closed, the snow already beginning to settle on his jacket and hair. His lips had taken on a faint bluish tint. His breathing was slow. Rex reached him first. And here is where something remarkable happened. A trained search and rescue dog, upon finding a lost person, is conditioned to alert, to signal to its handler that the subject has been located. The standard alert is a passive indication. The dog sits calmly beside the found person and waits for its handler. Rex did not do that. Rex barked. Loud, sharp, insistent. Not the bark of a dog that has completed its job, but the bark of a dog that is alarmed. He barked directly at Marcus's face. When Marcus didn't respond, Rex grabbed the sleeve of his jacket in his teeth and pulled. He didn't bite through the fabric, just gripped and tugged, again and again, trying to move the man, trying to get him up. Vasquez had never seen Rex do anything like it. "Rex, sit, Rex." The dog ignored the command entirely, which in 5 years of working together had never once happened. Rex continued to bark, continued to pull at the jacket, continued to push at Marcus's arm and shoulder with his nose. Marcus stirred. His eyes opened, barely, just slits. He looked at the dog above him without comprehension. "Hey!" Vasquez knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders. "Sir, can you hear me? Stay with me, sir." Marcus mumbled something. tried to close his eyes again. Rex barked so loudly that Dana Kowalski, still 10 meters back through the trees, stopped walking. What followed, in the minutes before the rest of the rescue team arrived, was something Pete Vasquez would spend years trying to describe accurately. Every time Marcus's eyes closed, every time his head drooped toward his chest or his body began to sag back toward the snow, Rex responded immediately, barking, nudging, gripping the jacket sleeve and pulling upward with surprising force. Once, Marcus's head fell to the side and his breathing slowed dangerously, and Rex pushed his entire head under the man's arm and lifted, physically repositioning him. Marcus, still caught in that twilight between consciousness and the cold dark, became confused and then frustrated. Get off," he muttered, weakly batting at the dog with one numb hand. "Leave me alone. I just need to sleep for a—" Rex barked in his face. 3 sharp, thunderous barks, inches from his nose. Marcus flinched awake. "What?" "Bark, bark." Tug on the sleeve. Nose under the arm, pushing. "Stop it." Marcus raised his voice, some deep reserve of energy summoned by irritation. He tried to push the dog away. Rex planted all 4 paws and refused to move, continuing to bark. His eyes, Vasquez later said, had an expression he had genuinely never seen before in an animal. A desperate urgency, like a person trying to communicate something critical through a language barrier, repeating the same words louder and louder, hoping somehow volume would create understanding. Vasquez tried to command the dog back. Rex looked at him once, a brief, almost apologetic glance, and then turned back to Marcus and barked again. "He won't stop," Vasquez said to Dana, almost wonderingly. "I've never seen him not respond to a command." Dana knelt on Marcus's other side, rubbing his arms briskly, checking his pulse. She could feel how cold he was through the jacket fabric. "The dog's right," she said quietly. Vasquez looked at her. "He can't sleep," Dana said. "Not out here. Not like this." She looked at Rex. Still barking, still pulling, still pushing, still refusing to let the stranger sink back into the snow, and something shifted in her expression. Not surprise exactly, more like recognition. "Good dog," she said softly. "Good dog. Keep going." The thing about hypothermia, the thing that makes it so lethal, is that it lies to you. When your core body temperature drops below a certain threshold, your brain begins to malfunction in a very specific and very cruel way. It tells you that you are warm. Tells you that you are comfortable. It creates a sensation of drowsiness that feels, to the person experiencing it, like ordinary tiredness after a long and exhausting day. Feels like a warm bed waiting. Feels like relief. It is none of those things. It is your body shutting down. Systematically, organ by organ, the lights go out. And sleep, that desperate, seductive pull toward the snow, is the last stage before unconsciousness. Before the kind of unconsciousness you don't recover from. In those fragmented moments of wakefulness, pulled back again and again by a barking, insistent dog he couldn't understand and couldn't escape, Marcus's mind began to clear, just slightly. Just enough. He remembered reading something. He couldn't remember where. A survival guide, maybe. Something he'd read years ago and filed away in whatever drawer of the mind holds information you never expect to need. If you fall asleep in the cold, you may not wake up. He blinked, looked at the dog above him, at those urgent, terrified eyes, and then, slowly, with the horrible clarity of a man who has been standing at the edge of something without knowing it, Marcus understood what the dog had been doing. Not attacking him. Not malfunctioning. Saving him. Every bark was a hand pulling him back from a ledge he hadn't known he was standing on. Every tug of the jacket was a voice saying not yet, not yet, not yet. The dog had found a man trying to die in the snow and had refused, with every ounce of its trained, instinctual, extraordinary animal self, to allow it. Marcus felt something move through him that had nothing to do with temperature. "Okay," he whispered, to the dog, to himself, to no one in particular. "Okay." He reached out one numb hand and placed it on Rex's head. Rex stopped barking. He sat down beside Marcus, pressed the full warmth of his body against the man's side, and waited. His tail moved once, slowly, against the snow. His ears stayed forward, alert, tracking. But the desperate barking was over because the desperate thing had stopped happening. The man was awake. The man understood. The rest of the team arrived 4 minutes later. They brought an emergency thermal blanket, a folding stretcher, and a flask of warm, sweet tea that Marcus would later describe as the best thing he had ever tasted in his life. They wrapped him and moved him and talked to him constantly, keeping him conscious, keeping him connected to the world. It took nearly an hour to carry him back to the trailhead through the storm. Rex walked the whole way beside the stretcher, occasionally pressing his nose to Marcus's dangling hand as if checking, just making sure, just confirming, that the warmth was still there. At the hospital in Pinecrest, the attending physician told Marcus that his core temperature had dropped to 33.2 degrees Celsius. Mild to moderate hypothermia. Another 30 minutes in the snow, she said, maybe less, and they would be looking at a very different outcome. She said it gently, clinically, the way doctors learn to deliver information that could send a person sideways. Marcus nodded. He was wrapped in heated blankets, and 4 in his arm, his fingers and toes burning with the painful, wonderful feeling of blood returning. He nodded, and then he looked at Pete Vasquez, who was standing in the doorway of the hospital room with his hands in his jacket pockets. "Your dog," Marcus said. His voice was still hoarse. "What's his name?" "Rex. Rex." He turned the name over. "Rex wouldn't let me sleep." Vasquez nodded. "No, sir. He would not." "Why? That's not... is that something he's trained to do?" Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Then, "He's trained to find people and alert. That's it. The sitting, the barking, the all of that." He paused. "That was Rex." Marcus looked at the ceiling for a long moment. "He knew," he said quietly. It wasn't quite a question. Vasquez thought about it. About the moment Rex had pulled off the trail, hard and certain, straight toward the valley. About the eyes of his dog in the snowstorm, not calm, not professional, not task completed. Afraid. Afraid of what was happening to the stranger in the snow. "I think he knew something was wrong," Vasquez said carefully, "and I think he wasn't willing to let it keep going." Marcus Hale was discharged from Pinecrest General Hospital the following morning. He drove home to Denver with 2 slightly frostbitten toes, a prescription for rest, and a story he wasn't sure anyone would believe. He told it anyway. He told it to his sister, who cried. He told it to his coworkers, who went quiet in a way that told him they understood its weight. He told it in a letter, an actual handwritten letter, the first he'd written in years, addressed to the Pinecrest Sheriff's Department, attention Officer Pete Vasquez and Rex. The letter was short. "I was ready to sleep. I didn't know what that meant. Your dog knew. I don't have the right words for what that is, but I wanted you to know that I think about it every day. Please give Rex something good to eat." The department framed the letter and hung it in the break room, next to a photograph of Rex in his tactical vest, ears forward, eyes alert, looking at something just past the camera. Something only he could see. There is a particular kind of intelligence in animals that we are still learning to measure. Not the intelligence of logic puzzles or language acquisition, something older than that. Something that does not need words to communicate danger or urgency or "I will not leave you here." Rex had found a man dying slowly in the snow and had understood, through some combination of training, instinct, and whatever mysterious thing it is that dogs possess that we have never been able to fully name, that the most important thing he could do in that moment was not sit and wait. It was to keep a man in the world long enough for help to arrive. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Drop your country in the comments. I read every single one. And subscribe because we have more stories like this coming your way. See you in the next one.